Hi, and welcome to Scrapbook.com. I'm Amy, and I would like to share with you today how to re-ink your hybrid ink pads. The hybrid ink, because it's a fast-drying ink, might dry out a little bit faster than some of the other pads that you have in your collection. So I kind of wanted to share with you a few tips on how to re-ink your ink pads and what it looks like if you over-ink an ink pad. So let's get started. I store all of my re-inkers in the ColorCase. They go tip down. So the ink is already engaged in the bottom of the barrel. You're going to want to put an even layer of the ink across your pad. So you're going to go back and forth. And see how it sits on top? And you're going to want to let it sit and sink in. Now these are fairly new pads, so it's not sinking in as quickly as it would if it were a dried pad. But you're going to want to let that sit. So I'm going to put the lid back on this, and we're going to let this one sink in and dry naturally and kind of absorb naturally. We're going to do the Candy Shop Pink, and I'm going to show you a different technique to kind of give you an idea how to get it nice and smooth. The application so that it's very smooth and easy to see how much quicker that is absorbing. This pad was a little bit dry. And you'll go back and forth both directions. And then you let it sit for 10 or 15 minutes because it's going to absorb into the felt pad. Now, if you look at this black one, I'm going to bring the black one in. You saw how quickly that absorbed in. You know that you're doing it correctly when it absorbs like that. This was a newer pad, so it had more ink in it already, so it didn't absorb as well. If this ever happens, and not just necessarily with hybrid inks, but with any ink pad, if it sits on top like that, you're going to want to just take your pad. This is the Vicki Boutin Silicone Art Wedge, and you're just going to take that excess ink on top, and you're going to smooth it out. So you're going to kind of bring it to the corners, and see how much more smooth that is. So if you get too much, and I'll show that again, because it sits on top of the pad, and if you don't have this art wedge, you can use a credit card, you can use a gift card, not a current credit card that you're going to use for like shopping, but an expired credit card or a gift card, something like that. So see how that's kind of just sitting on top, it's not absorbing. You're just going to give it a little bit of help. You're just going to kind of smooth it out to the edges. If the pad is super dry, like the pink one was, it's going to absorb with no problem at all. This has a lot of pigment in it, so it's going to sit a little bit longer on top. And your pad is re-inked. Next, we're going to re-ink the crushed velvet. And sometimes we get a little overzealous when we re-ink, and you squeeze too much on, and it gets too wet and inky. When you go to stamp it, it's going to puddle on your stamp instead of actually giving you a nice, clean, crisp image. So this also helps for that. So you can see how much that's just sitting on top. This is a pretty new pad. It's just sitting on top like that. Take your scraper and scrape off the excess. There's a lot of excess. And you're just going to scrape it off and go, ooh, I hope I didn't overdo my pad. Because you can, it is a thing, you can over ink your ink pad. So if you can you see that? If you can get drips of ink off of your ink pad, you know you've over-inked it. I highly recommend inking your stamp pads in intervals. So give it a small layer of ink, let it sit, let it absorb for like 10 or 15 minutes, test it with a stamp that you test all of your inks with, see how it works. If you still have splotches or spots that just aren't the way you want them, then go back 10 or 15 minutes later and add another light coating of your re-inker, because you don't want to over ink. So you're better to err on the side of caution than to just go at it ham in the paint style and dump a ton of ink on your pad and then ruin your pad and have to scrape off the excess. So I highly recommend doing the re-inking in intervals. And that's how you re-ink your ink pads. I hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more from Scrapbook.com, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a message. Happiness is life handmade.